Okay, so Josh, welcome. Thanks for being here with us today. So Josh, you're actually based in San Francisco, I believe. So you're probably on your morning coffee as we're approaching the end of the working day here in the UK. So thanks for starting your morning with us. Um, so Josh, I've been really excited to do this episode for a wee while now, as you know, you have undoubtedly a very impressive career and track record as a technology leader. So you're currently the CTO and co-founder of Airplane.Dev. So Airplane is a startup company founded in 2021. It is a developer platform for internal tools, excuse me. So a really cool platform. I'll obviously let you say a little bit more about what it is that you guys do, but we actually know some of our clients already use your platform, so that's pretty cool. And prior to joining or founding Airplane, you were the first hire and CTO at Benchling, I believe, and obviously helped that business scale, to over 300 people and achieve a valuation of 6 billion. So I think it's fair to say you know what you're doing, and clearly a very revered technology leader. So really looking forward to hearing some words of wisdom today from you. But yeah, let's start where we always do, I suppose, at the beginning. So talk us through a little bit about where it all began for you in tech, and just sort of tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into tech in the first place, if you would be so kind.
Sure, of course. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I'll say probably no one really knows what they're doing, but we all do our best. But yeah, so in terms of my background, I guess I was your typical child nerd. MIT was my dream school, wanted to go to MIT, did everything I could to. Luckily got in, and so I was that kid at the front of the class, basically. Went to all my classes, absolutely just loved learning. Things like distributed systems, compilers, operating systems. It was just a lot of fun. I started there because my LinkedIn history is pretty brief, because I am graduating a year early from MIT and then joined a bunch of MIT friends over at Benchling. Had no idea what life sciences was really, but it seemed really cool to be at that intersection of software and biology. The founders at Benchling were really smart, but I think more importantly, they were just really hardworking. They were really gritty people, and I thought that was really important for a startup. And I just figured, if not now, when, right? Wouldn't probably want to do a startup when I got older. So I ended up joining them in the summer of 2013. So early days, software engineer, just work on everything, front end, back end, just making the t-shirts. As the company grew, I like to say my role probably changed every 6 to 9 months. So I went from being IC to manager, to some sort of like architect role, the whole time talking a lot to customers, building a lot of internal tooling as well, actually, a lot of infrastructure. It was really fun because it's just such a dynamic role. I did our ISO 27K certification. So it got me exposed to a whole lot of different things. Um, I ended up, so that company kept growing and still growing, and a lot of great people there. But at some point, I wanted to start from scratch. Felt like, really just missed the idea of like building very hands-on. And so around 2020, I made that decision. It was really unfortunate timing. It was right when we announced the COVID quarantine. And so I was like, I'll wait for this quarantine thing to end. I'll come back and then say goodbye to everyone in person. So that never ended up happening, sadly, right? Took a few months to offboard, and it took like about half a year to research things. So that's where I ended up meeting up with my now co-founder, Ravi. He had left his startup Heap around the same time, so we got the timing very lucky. And we were entrepreneurs in residence at Benchmark. And really just meant like they gave us a lot of latitude to just look at ideas and research things. So that was really great in our journey to figure out Airplane. We looked through a lot of different areas actually before realizing that we both just really liked working with engineers as much as we could. And so we ended up looking at dev tools and started looking at Airplane stuff around the end of 2020. which is when we incorporated, and been working on that ever since. So yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell.
Awesome, awesome. Really like that. It's a great story. I think it's always fantastic to talk through a success story, and clearly you've put your money where your mouth is, and not sort of rested on your laurels with Benchling, but gone and done it again on your own, like I say, and built something from scratch. So, and especially at, like I say, a very tricky time to do it as well. We founded True North, similar kind of time really, in end of 2019, so just before the pandemic, and I know firsthand not an easy time to start a business. So hats off to you guys for what you've achieved so far. Um, so talk us through then, Airplane. Okay, what it explain the core problem that Airplane solves for development teams, and yeah, I guess the value that the internal tools can bring.
Yeah, so I'll start saying, like, when we started Airplane, we didn't really use the word internal tools. We're really trying to just line that up with what we see the industry sort of converging on. But at the end of the day, we just saw a lot of wasted effort, right? You see a lot of people rebuilding the same things. I saw this at Benchling, saw this at Heap. And we started with the idea of like just not taking the problem of running scripts ad hoc, which seemed like a very small, toyish problem, but we felt like a lot of potential to grow from there.
Mm,
And we just wanted to make that better. And so a lot of cases, you see some engineer running some database script from their laptop, and maybe their Wi-Fi disconnects, and next thing you know, there's like a whole outage. And so we started there, but you quickly realize that there's a lot of patterns that you end up solving through the platform that end up generalizing. So all this to say, like, the idea of internal tools is to let just people build better business software for themselves.
mm,
I think, I say like every company can have software that they build and sell, software that they buy, and then software that they build and use themselves. And so it's that third category that we think is underlooked right now. A lot of times software is transient. It's just for like this temporary, effort that you're doing. It's bespoke. It's very custom to how your company works. Or maybe it's just really small. It's like you want a little like internal form that like gets your t-shirt sizes from employees, and you want to automate something around it. And so in those cases, you don't need to like pay $5 a month to some SaaS company to do that. You should just build it yourself. So really, that's what we want to do. We just want to enable better software creation within some specialty. And so that's a high level, but like to talk to Ashley about the customers, right? They don't see it that way. They're like, we have problems to solve. We're not just trying to build forms here. And so what they're solving, that's been really interesting because going from vertical SaaS at Benchling to very horizontal dev tools, you see a whole different range of companies. So we have customers that are your typical SaaS and fintech startups who are doing a lot of support and operations. But then you have like folks who are like a two-person realtor in the Midwest who know how to code and like use Airplane to automate their listings. Or you have e-commerce startup in Southeast Asia, or you have healthcare. And so these are all very different scenarios, but at the end of the day, what they're solving with Airplane is taking common patterns, common functions in their company, and turning that into code. So in like more like VC speak, right? I would say like this is more API-ification of your company, turning what does it mean to suspend a user into something, a button that someone can click, rather than saying, hey, I'll file a ticket and like, Josh and IT will do that for me.
mm.
So that's sort of, I think, the customer lens. But at the end of the day, if you look at the Airplane platform, the idea is that we provide these abstractions, these building blocks for you to that saves you time. And the idea is to keep asking what else can we solve for you, our customers, and just keep doing that and expanding that. So that now includes things like UI components, notifications, authorization, authentication, where to run your function, how the SDKs for building that. So a lot of these little building blocks that you need.
Yeah, wicked. I love that. And when I kind of came across the concept for Airplane, I just love how I think you really nailed what a company does well. Is you just find kind of a problem, and either just add value to that. You've really streamlined the process, I guess, that for a lot of people was a minor frustration, but you've kind of really added a lot of value into that space. And I guess the other thing that really struck me is, like I say, just how universally applicable it is, and I guess that's one of the exciting things about how you can have a customer over here doing something completely different to a customer over here, but both getting a huge amount of value from the platform. And it's not often, you can say that in the world of tech, that you've got such a diverse sort of client base. So yeah, I think that's really exciting. Is there anything in particular you feel about Airplane in terms of how you differentiate yourself from other, kind of tools and collaboration platforms that exist in the market? What you guys are doing slightly differently?
Yeah. So first, like my non-answer is that I like to say, like in the early stages, companies often focus too much on competition. They're typically their own competitors, right? Like, your own competition is just like making mistakes and not delivering a product that people actually like. But at the end of the day, like it is still you can't ignore it, and it's important to think about how you're adding your own unique impression to the world. And so there's a few factors here, so a few angles. One is that some of our competitors are more focused on UI building, and so it's trying to solve a lot of that problem of building basically rich applications. But we're a lot more opinionated on that. We do have a product for that, but the core of Airplane is write a little script, deploy it, and then you get a whole form you get a UI for the output. And so a lot of our cases, we just don't think it's the exact UI is important for our customers. And so we make that a lot faster to get to that final application. The second thing is we're not low code or no code. I like to joke it's like yes code or easy code. It's a bit of it's been an interesting bet that certain tools are just better when you're building in code. It means that someone in marketing might not be able to do it themselves, which is unfortunate, but means that the engineer who is ultimately often maintaining and building the tool can do that a lot faster, right? And so we try to optimize for those sorts of abstractions where you can use version control, you can use GitHub, you can use JavaScript, you import a function, and all these common patterns that are obvious when you're coding, like reusing code or importing code from somewhere else or refactoring or using code search tools. You can do all of that now because Airplane is written in code. And I think it scales much better. So, at Benchling, we had very important support tools and customer success and implementation tools. And when those tools went down, it was an outage basically for like a team much larger than engineering. And so you had to really treat database migrations or testing of those tools the same as you would test production software. So second bucket there is just really using code, leveraging code to build better tooling.
Yeah, I like that.
And then there's the third category for like we sometimes compete with just more general frameworks. And like, oh, like maybe I can just use Django admin for this or whatever vanilla framework that you might just want to use. We love those frameworks and we build on top of some of them ourselves, but Airplane operates at a little higher level abstraction. The design exercise behind Airplane is, what if we took infrastructure but applied it to a specific scenario of internal tools to end up with a more opinionated, a better stack? And we like to think the answer is yes there. So you end up, if you don't use Airplane, having to redo a lot of the glue and just sometimes build it yourself, more so than if you were to just use Airplane.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I like that, especially the I say actually the use code part of it, and makes a lot of sense. And I suppose it's always nice to receive positive feedback from your clients. And looking at your kind of client list, you've already got a pretty established client base already by the sounds of it. But have you got any real world examples or case studies where Airplane has actually, really significantly kind of changed the game for certain companies and kind of improved productivity or kind of project outcomes?
Yeah, for sure. There's been a few, a lot, but I'm trying to think of a few that maybe we could focus on. Um, I will say that it has been really broad, like I was saying earlier, and so that's been really fascinating to see. I will say the core of where a lot of companies start is around DevOps and engineering workflows. So some of our earliest customers, like Panther, are using Airplane to automate engineering for engineering kind of tasks, right? Because that's where you often start because we attract a lot of code heavy users, right? And so The most basic scenario is they say, "Hey, Josh, I was finally able to get prod DB access lockdown," and not in like a you can't touch this kind of way, but more like here's a responsible way of working with your database. Here's Airplane, right? Here's the Notion page on how to use Airplane, how to write in tasks. Next time you're about to like just run a script, do this instead. Here's like the better way to, safer way to do that. And so that you see people using that for automating their operational runbooks, incident response tools, dashboards showing their deployments. So that's, I think, like a great starting point. But then you start realizing, hey, I can actually use this for a bunch of other scenarios as well. So Branch is another example where they're, I would say, like insure tech company. And they run an incredibly large size chunk of their backend processes through Airplane. Of course, they have a great engineering team and they're focusing on building the product. But for everything else, right, like support, operations, engineering tools as well, these are all built in tasks and views that are on Airplane. And so Airplane gives them a really robust way of scaling those subsystems.
Mm.
Um, on the other hand, there's this e-commerce company I was working with, based out of Southeast Asia. They use Airplane for support operations, and they had this annual holiday sale, similar like a Black Friday. And as you expect, it's usually like a really chaotic day. But last year, they totally unsolicited just messaged us saying, by the way, I just want to let you know that Airplane fundamentally changed how this day works for us. It used to be super manual, a lot of issues cropping up during the day, a lot of fires. There's probably still just as much chaos, but it's a lot more manageable now because they have this tooling that they've built on Airplane to help automate a lot of that away. And so, you see all these various different scenarios across different companies. But at its core, it's really about software automation, right? And building tooling for humans.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that, and it must be deeply fulfilling when you kind of hear those kind of stories, like I mentioned. But what I love about that is, like I said, just the difference in scenarios there, but
Yeah.
the adding value in every instance, and that's really cool. So, in the world that we live in now, and I guess the post COVID world, where the world is more distributed, probably more remote than we've ever been before, have you built Airplane in a particular way to facilitate kind of remote collaboration? Is that something that's
Yeah.
a big piece of the way the platform's been designed?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Airplane itself is a bit of a distributed company. I would say it's more of two hubs, SF in New York, plus some remote folks. But we do face some of these challenges already. Um, I think for all its potential upsides with being remote and distributed, the main notable downside is communication is a lot harder. Right, you have to get really good at communicating in writing, in process some certain processes. You can't just say, "Hey, like we had this disagreement. Let's just chat live over coffee or something." And so communication is really hard. You also learning is hard. Where if you're new to the team, you're on a new support prep, you have to really have good documentation to get them to understand. Here's our process for issuing a refund. And so where Airplane helps is that we help you essentially code your company as a set of APIs, right? Rather than a document saying how to suspend a user or apply a coupon, here's a task that you can click. And here's the code behind that task. If you're an engineer, so you see exactly what it's doing. And so we have this task, for example, to upgrade a team to the enterprise plan. And so it'll handle canceling the Stripe charge and upgrading certain feature flags. And these are all things you could do as a human, but now there's one place to do it. And you know that, next time Josh does this, he's not going to mess up and forget to, disable this part of the trial. And so it's essentially just a form of shared communication, right? By replacing these manual tasks with Airplane tasks. And the second thing with Airplane is that it gives you this visibility into your company. We'd obviously love for you to put everything in your company onto Airplane. But the more you do it, the more you can see what others have done on Airplane because of how we audit and surface these sorts of things. Auditing sounds really boring. It sounds like a, compliance piece, but it's really more than that. I think it's more of like it's like, on Facebook when you can see a feed of your friends, right? Like Airplanes, like you start seeing a feed of what people are doing. And we got a support ticket that came in. Customer wanted to, you know, delete this part of their data. You know, oh, I saw that Josh already ran this yesterday. Let me talk to him about that instead. And so you get this visibility into who's doing what with your team. Hey, we've run a lot of support password reset requests for the last 2 months. What's going on here? We have people now like sending Airplane to their Datadog instance and doing analytics on it. And so, anyways, yeah. So you get this visibility that you might otherwise not have because things are more remote.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And I guess with I mean the visibility piece, I can imagine being very important, especially as let's say you ideally want to get in a position where companies obviously using it more and more and becoming more reliant on it. But with that in mind, what security and confidentiality clearly is a big part to play in any company's process, especially if kind of automating engineering. But how how does Airplane tackle that problem? From a security point of view.
Yeah. I like to think of that in terms of two pieces. First is the security of Airplane, and then second is security of our customers and how that's benefited from using Airplane. Right. So first of all, like, yeah, Airplane is SOC 2 compliant, right? We do more than what the bare minimum of SOC 2 requires us to do. It's just very important for us to be secure because trust is a fundamental part of our business. And that was true in the Benchling days. And so luckily I have the same kind of perspective going into Airplane. On the technical side, right? Like we've built the platform to be multi-tenant, but with granular permissions from the start. So everything is segmented by which team you're on. We have fine-grained permissions within a team. We have this like policy framework around authorization that runs everywhere on all your requests. These are all standard SaaS best practices, but it's just something we've had since day one. We also offer on-premise hosting. We found that it is definitely a different world in 2023, where maybe 10 years ago, on-prem was really important to a lot of people. Now I would say it's a lot really important to maybe half as many people. It's still a very important piece, but to get right though. And so we have this sort of hybrid model there of on-prem hosting where we let a customer self-host parts of Airplane. And so the parts that they can self-host, it's a bit of a dial. And so we started out with just compute. So you take the agents and it would execute stuff within your network, connect to private databases if necessary, and I'll do that all within your AWS account, for example. But then we would send that data back to Airplane. The second piece that we're launching soon in GA in beta right now is self-hosted storage. And so the outputs of the compute can now be stored on your premises as well. And you can imagine us over time taking more and more chunking out our Airplane infrastructure and saying, now you can self-host this part, now you can self-host this part. And for our largest customers, it might be fully self-hosted, right? And so there's a range there. And I want to sort of give ground grudgingly to get to that fully self-hosted. Because I do think the other thing to balance this whole thing against is by only self-hosting parts that you need to self-host, the customer gets a much better experience, right? You let Airplane manage security of the core central pieces, the control plane of the system, et cetera. And you only have to deal with, certain parts of it. It's a lot lower maintenance. It's a lot less effort. And I think at the end of the day, security is, in fact, just as good or better
Yeah.
when the team is dedicated to that, right?
Mm.
The last piece here is the security of our customers, and that's also really important. Where Airplane is sort of come for the quick tasks, but stay for the like security and compliance posture, right? Like it's different people we're talking to how they work, but the sale to the CTO or the CISO is different than selling to an engineer. For the CTO and CISO, this is how you get great visibility into what's actually happening within your org, right? Before this, your engineers were connecting to prod anyways. You just didn't know about it. And now you have a single place and you can say, okay, like this should be read only, or if it's going to make a change, require two engineers to approve. And if something did happen, you have an audit trail now, which you often are missing and you should have for SOC 2 compliance. And so these are all things that you just really get for free just by using Airplane. And so Airplane as a security tool is also really powerful. And I think we'll start seeing more and more of that as we go more, up market into the enterprise.
Cool, awesome, yeah, makes a lot of sense, and yeah, really thorough answer there to that question. So thanks for that. And
Important. Yeah.
yeah, it is important, absolutely. And it feels like, just on the whole, it's a really well considered approach to the whole platform. So no wonder you guys are smashing it and going from strength to strength. So yeah, I'm going to be very excited to see where Airplane goes from here, because it feels like the possibilities are almost limitless. But what I'd like to do is you mentioned a couple of times you've taken a bit of the learnings from your time at Benchling, and sort of built on that with Airplane. So it'd be great to understand a little bit more about your approach as a CTO. I suppose
Yeah.
going specifically within Benchling, was it the first hire into the business, and sort of scaling that business, kind of 250, 300 people plus.
Yeah.
Talk us through. There's a lot of CTOs out there that would be very keen to hear how they achieve that kind of scale, and are there any sort of approaches, methodologies, consistencies that you take to a situation to scale tech teams, I suppose. Talk us through a little bit about your approach to scaling as a CTO.
I think first I'll say the title CTO is very varied, and you sort of have to think to yourself, like, what kind of CTO are you, right? There's the CTO where you're basically a co-founder. You're just using that to indicate that you're the more technical focused co-founder. There's a CTO where you're really a VP of engineering, or management, your main job. There's a CTO where you're the head product person, very technical kind of product. There's a CTO where you're an architect, where maybe the product is not as technical, but the output is not as technical, but how you build there is very technical. And then there's the place where you're the main salesperson. You're taking the stage at reInvent and trying to really like get people to use your product. And then obviously people are a combination of all of those, right? And so my advice really, only applies to a certain subset of that. Um, and so that's really the first thing to think about. Like, what is your actual role here? Like, what are you good at? What are you focused on?
Yeah.
In terms of my experience, so eventually it was a lot more on the like technical infrastructure piece, architecture, working with customers, and so helping our team scale through technology. And then at Airplane, it's been a lot more focused. Ultimately, as a co-founder, my job is to do everything that isn't being done and try to scale that out over time. And in the early days, right, it was managing a whole team. I do have we have a new head of engineering join us early this year, and he's been fantastic and really operationalizing more of the engineering team himself. And so, anyways, long-winded answer to say, like, it varies and it really depends. The main theme I've noticed is just for engineering specifically, trying to balance autonomy with the prescriptive nature that I think my personality lends to, right? Like, getting this business, I have strong opinions on the product I want to build, certain aspects, how I want to build it, certain like infrastructure investments that we need to make. And so, like, I think that's part of my value add as founder, right? Like, understanding that and having a vision for where we're going to get there. You need to balance that though with also the fact that we have, a dozen or so engineers working with me and designers, and eventually that was even larger. And so balancing that with autonomy is really important. And I think that's always been the biggest challenge in figuring out the right dial at the right stage. Right. Early on, you sort of want everyone to be working really closely together and to be involved in like a lot of the major decisions. But at this stage of Airplane, I need every individual engineer, all the individual teams to be highly autonomous and to make good decisions without me having to look at it, right? Or put differently, they don't want me micromanaging them either. And so how do you do that? I think it's a very hard challenge. It's easier said than done, but the way I think about it is you need culture really to establish the like core thing of making sure everyone thinks about certain problems in the same approach, right? Like, is this ready? And I don't mean like you have to do everything the same way exactly. Like, you want diversity in like approach, but I think you want consistency in a quality bar or in coding style or in just how much we care about the customer experience, right? Versus just focusing on hard technical challenges. And so those are things that you really just as a leader have to live and just be very, hopefully it should be very obvious to our teams what Josh cares about. And as you work with me and then work with people who work with me, you start understanding that and everyone starts forming the same opinions on, okay, this isn't good enough to ship. Well, we need to like do another iteration on this. Or, this is taking way too long. Like we need to get this out there fast. And these are all things that I will say in working with people, and you sort of just, anyways, you build culture by really acting through it. And I think that's how you really scale. Because then at some point you have these teams and you say, hey, Justin, you're the tech lead of this team. Just go figure out, here's the main problems I need you to solve. Go figure out how to do it. And you trust that they can do it and that they're going to do it in the same cultural alignment that the rest of the teams are thinking about. And that's when I think things start really building momentum and working, because then they run way faster than I can keep up with. And that's, intentional. And then I can focus on only certain aspects of the business at a given point in time.
Brilliant. No, I think it's a really, again, really thorough and great answer. And yeah, I totally agree with you. Obviously, with the world of CTO, it's a very subjective title. It means very different things in different companies. As you know, especially in a startup company, can mean wearing many hats simultaneously. But I really like the point you make about, actually it's sort of looking objectively outside of yourself sometimes and thinking, actually, what kind of CTO do I want to be, and where are my strengths and kind of where am I best? Because certainly in a and that is often when I speak to CTOs that are in that earlier stage business, because they are wearing so many hats, they really struggle with that scaling piece, because they're constantly running around putting out fires and getting involved with anything from writing code to infrastructure issues, and then obviously client facing piece and that kind of thing. So it's just actually knowing where are my strengths best served, and where do I need to bring people in that can sort of plug those gaps for me. And I totally agree with your point about culture as well. I think to truly scale a business, it has to scale past one person's input, and you need that unity and clarity over approach to solve problems. Absolutely agree with it. It sort of transcends very similarly into recruitment as well, actually. I'm sure it's the same with every business out there, really. But no, great question, great point. And one of the things I was quite keen to understand, I suppose, the internal tooling world with Airplane, and just sort of where the world of software engineering is going in general at the moment, with the rise of call it AI, but let's say large language models, the likes of ChatGPT and all that kind of thing, and how that's impacting software engineering in a big way. Really interested to get your take on this, as clearly a very technical, hands-on CTO in the past. But how do you feel the world of AI, use it in a loose term, intersecting with the world of software engineering, and sort of what do you feel that the future holds there?
Yeah, I will say it's definitely been a roller coaster. It's I think the big question for me is just how fast AI grows from here. Because where the trajectory ultimately, I think, determines a lot of things. When GPT-2 came out, it was very different than GPT-4, right? It was, and so the question is, what does GPT, I don't know, 7 look like, right? If they keep that sort of versioning scheme. And so I think I like to think of this when I'm talking to the team as well. I break this down to like the bear case and the bull case. The bear case is still really interesting. It's not like a disappointment at all, but like maybe I'll start with saying like the GPT-4 today is really good. It's one of the few areas that's been demonstrably good at is coding, right? It's probably also really impactful in other areas, medicine, law. I'm not a doctor, I don't know. But where I can see with my own eyes is GitHub Copilot, or having ChatGPT open in a window and asking it to help me debug things.
Yeah.
Is it going to be able to write Airplane for me? Maybe not. Our engineers on team are already asking. We have Claude, which is Anthropic's model, as a Slack bot. Are they already asking Claude for help through Slack? Yes. So, like it's already, the bear case is that this is the best we have, and turns out the transformer architecture doesn't really keep scaling, and we just can't figure out the next architecture. We're running out of data to like train on, and really this is the best we got. It's like a very, 25th percentile software engineer who makes a lot of mistakes. But like, it's a lot cheaper than hiring a software engineer. And so I think in that world, where GitHub Copilot is sort of the best we have, it's still hugely impactful, right? Like maybe people aren't laying off engineers in mass at that point, but engineers I think are 20%, 50% more effective. And you write a little function and the AI just fills it in, right? Today, like I had to like do this like batch deduping logic when I was rendering a component, and I wrote the function and I just hit tab like 30 times and just filled it in for me, right? And so that's today, right? And I think that it turns out most software engineering jobs, as much as we like to think, like we have like these funny interview questions and all these algorithms, right? Most of the job is writing boilerplate code. Um, a software engineer is still very valuable because they can solve that like hardest 10, 20% when it does come up. But a lot of it is boilerplate. And I think even today's AI can take a chunk of that. And so I think that's the bear case, right? I'm obviously very convinced at the bare minimum impact that I can have. The bull case, I think it gets really scary, right? With the optimistic, or depending on your view, maybe not optimistic case, the like high trajectory growth case is that reaches a level of intelligence that rivals like the median engineer. It doesn't even have to be the best engineer, right? The average engineer. So imagine like the engineers you've worked with, or that take the middle one of them. Imagine that they now, if they didn't already, receive feedback very well, that they're working 24/7. You have a GPU and they'll just keep working. And then they've helped you, I don't know, hire a dozen of their own friends, right? So now you have 12 of those people just working 24/7 with you. And maybe there's some interface to them, right? Maybe you have Jira and you create a ticket that says like implement the like landing page, and you go to sleep and you wake up and it's done. Like that, I think is very plausible already. And like going past that, right? It's like, okay, there's AGI, there's like, will it then write an AI that will like kill us all? I don't know. But like if you just look at the very boring case of like this automation of a software engineer, I just can't imagine the software engineering roles could be the same.
Mm.
I don't know what's going to look like, right? I feel like we're not used to having our own jobs challenged in this bit. Like everyone's like, oh, I want to replace myself. But like, how much do you actually want to replace yourself? And I think software engineers can be very different in this case, right? Maybe everyone's an architect, but how many software architects do you really need on a team? And like, who does what parts of the stack? I think a lot of that's going to end up being challenged if we do reach this case. We might not, but I do think that's like a real possibility now. And so in that world, right, how does Airplane fit in? How does software engineering fit in? Is very hard to say. I think that for us, like, there's a chance it just surpasses. I need a table. Okay, just prints out a table for you, and like, okay, I need that to be a lot more performant, and I need that to hook it up with a serverless platform, and maybe it can do that. Our best case is that it really can't do that last part, and so Airplane's just giving this AI all the primitives it needs to assemble software rapidly, right? Take an AI, ask it to for a business use case. I need a quick tool to see fraudulent signups, and then say, okay, like let me break this down. I need to build like 4 airplane tasks, connect that to like an airplane view, add in this permissioning, this notification. Does this look good? You say ship it, and it's like 10 minutes and you have like a whole airplane tool. So I'm really hoping that that's the outcome, obviously. But I'm not, I'm sort of a passenger here as much as you are.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like the comparison there, the base versus the bold, but it's pretty crazy to think that I always have this conversation about ChatGPT about how long humans have been on the planet, and if you look at where we are now in literally the last few years of, I know
Um,
large language models have been around for a long time, but I guess ChatGPT is the first time it's been really kind of universally adopted, isn't it, worldwide, and sort of now on everybody's radar and consciousness. That really has happened in kind of the blink of an eye. And when you talk about the bold case scenario, like I said, it really doesn't take too much of a stretch of imagination to kind of feel that is plausible, and actually how long it could be until we get into that situation. But I am a firm believer that exactly the same way that you said that will it ever be able to build Airplane? Probably not, because I think we're still so far away from a level of sentient intelligence and kind of an AGI that understands context to the degree that it understands there's a problem there to be solved. I still feel that is quite a way away, and therefore human input is always going to be be required. It's not that Chat GPT and AI is going to replace humans, but
Yeah.
it's the new system, and we need to work out how we get the best out of it. And that's so I don't know whether to be kind of depressed or optimistic for the future, but all I know is it's very interesting, isn't it? And we'll see
Yeah.
where we go from here.
I mean, because I'll point out like that's the same thing we said for GPT-2, right? And we was like, oh, it's like I'm talking to Einstein, and or maybe talk like Steve Jobs, and no, this is cute. Like your place is like, I don't know if you ever did like the AIM chatbots that like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's like great, we're at that stage. But I don't believe it'll actually be like able to do more complex thoughts or it can't solve this kind of puzzle. And then GPT-4 came out. So I do think it is like a trajectory case, right? Is this like a logistics curve or is it an exponential curve? And so we will see.
We will see, indeed, absolutely. Let's do another podcast in a year's time and see where we are. I might be replaced by ChatGPT.
Yeah, you and I are just two AIs on each other at that point.
Cool, cool. Well, I guess I'd like to sort of close by asking, I think, clearly incredibly competent guy, Josh, and can see why you've been very successful as a technology leader. But I'm sure there have been highs and lows, and I'm sure there's been a lot of challenges along the way, in your sort of tech journey. So, what would you say has been one of your greatest challenges that you faced as a technology leader, and
Yeah.
how did you overcome it?
I think my first like really non-answer is like the hardest challenge is that is a ton of small challenges, right? I would love it was like, oh, the biggest challenge was we had to really make perf work at this thing, and we did that, and then the business was solved, right? It turns out that like it was like 100 different small things, right? Oh, I need to like ramp up recruiting. Okay, we have this like funnel here, or like we had to do multi-tenancy, and at one point, do we evolve the platform to support this kind of new object? And so like both like technical, product, customer facing, like at Benchling, it was like 4 years of a grind, really finding product market fit. And then turns out like at the end of the day, like the click was first of all, we had to build like a lot of product, but second of all, really learn how to sell enterprise. Right. So these are all like it's like the main challenge was that it's just training. It's a lot of work, and you sort of had to just keep going for years at a time before you see like the right results. Now, more specifically, I will say like as from a technology side, the most interesting theme that I've seen more at Benchling was just building enterprise software and how let's call it like infrastructure or cloud deployments really worked when selling to biotech and pharma. So I mean by that is like when we started, we were a bunch of 20-year-olds. I think the average age was under 21. We were trying to convince like a biotech company to put its sensitive IP on this platform. And so you sort of had to like do a lot of things to make that happen, right? We put them in their own VPC. We had their own encrypted database that we managed for them, and their own instance of Benchling. And so by the time 2018 comes around, you had like 80 different deployments of Benchling. You had the multi-tenant version, you had an academic version, and so a lot of challenges like scaling and making that work. A lot of automation, a lot of architecture to like make that happen. But then as we evolved, it was then moving back to multi-tenancy, back to like putting a lot of our customers on the same instance, but making that still really secure. But then on the like super enterprise end, it was moving from deploying to our customers' AWS account to, I think, and this is past my time, finally convincing them to move back into an Benchling hosted infrastructure account. So really like I saw this like wild arc of like initial customers being like really sell a single tenant, or a lot of customers weren't willing to buy Benchling because they wanted like deployment into their own data centers. Right. This was like even before a lot of pharma was adopting AWS. It's like, oh, we have this data center in Oregon. Do you mind? Can you support like VMware, vSphere, or whatever? And we would say, no, we do cloud, right? And that was a crazy trend because at first it was like, okay, well, we don't do cloud yet. And then by like 2017, 2018, it's like, okay, like, what is this cloud thing? Like, can you help us get into that? And so that was basically a lot of small transition points, but a really interesting technical challenge and just evolving Benchling over the years. And I'm sure the Benchling team has even more to do today, but seeing how biotech and pharma eventually adopted cloud, even multi-tenancy, was definitely a very fortuitous trend for benchling, I will say, but also a very interesting technical challenge for us to evolve through.
Cool. Yeah, lovely. Very, very nice, pragmatic answer there, and great that you can kind of single out a particular technical challenge. But I also totally agree with you. I think in all walks of life, it's very rarely defined by one singular challenge, and it is, making the right decisions on a daily basis against lots of little small issues, small struggles, small challenges that
Yep.
ultimately amount to success or failure, isn't it? Yeah, couldn't agree with you more on that front. Awesome. Well, Josh, look, I've really, really enjoyed the chat today. I think it's been a fantastic episode, and I really thank you for coming on and telling us more about the exciting stuff going on at Airplane, and sharing a bit of your wisdom around building and scaling teams. I like to end every podcast with the same question, which is, if there is one piece of advice that has stuck with you throughout your career. You're probably going to tell me now there's lots of little pieces of advice. But
Uh,
if you think of one piece of advice that you would pass on to your fellow humankind, what would
yeah.
that be for you?
No, I actually do have a singular one here. I think it's um basically this regret minimization framework advice that one of the Benchling founders told me when I was deciding if I want to join Benchling, but I think Jeff Bezos originally said it. But essentially, like, at the end of the day, a lot of life decisions have a lot of factors surrounding them. Like if you're trying to choose which company to join, if you're choosing to do a startup or a large company, you can't just write down a pro and con list and count things up. You have to it's not an easy decision. And I think the simplest fact thing that I found that actually solves it is just to think about, if I didn't do this, would I regret it in say 10 years? Right. And so for benchling or something, like if I didn't do this, I would probably go to some large tech company at the time and just have a lot of fun building technical stuff. But I'd probably regret not giving a shot. If I did take a shot, right? Maybe benchling doesn't work out. In a few years, we fold, and I could then go join whatever large tech company I would have joined. And so, but I would have known that I would have given it my best shot. We have learned a lot. I would have basically not regretted having made that decision. And so that, I think, summarizes a lot of my thinking when there's a lot of unknowns. Is like, would I regret not doing this or not? And so it's not the most objective framework. It's not very well thought out, but I think it's really the best you can do in certain cases.
Yeah, I like that. I think when you talk about regret, it kind of hits at an emotional level, doesn't it? And I think that's what people can relate to when you're forecasting in the future. Am I going to regret this or not? Yeah, it kind of cuts to the emotion straight away, doesn't it? And usually gives you the right answer pretty quickly. Yeah, talking.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't use that for deciding, like, what architecture should I use for this SaaS that I'm building.
Yeah.
So please, I wouldn't say don't do that, but yeah, for large life decisions, just I think that's the only way you can do it.
Cool. Like it a lot. Brilliant. Well, yeah, I guess all that remains to do is say thanks again for coming on, being such a fantastic guest. Really enjoyed the chat, and yeah, I'll absolutely be keeping my eyes and ears open for seeing how Airplane does and watching it go from success to success as you move forward.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Bye for now.
Take care.